In this video, we're going to start considering some of the detail of the evidence that connected Brendan McConville to the shooting of PC Stephen Carroll on the 9th of March 2009. In order to do that, we're going to have to consider John Paul Wooten, who was Brendan McConville's co-defendant in the course of this trial. John Paul Wooten was eventually convicted for the killing of Stephen Carroll alongside Brendan McConville. It is in the rear or the boot of a Citroen Saxo motor vehicle that John Paul Wooten is the registered keeper of that some of the most important evidence regarding Brendan McConville's connection to the case was found. So in this video, we're going to consider the first section of the scientific evidence arising from the exhibits found in John Paul Wooten's boot. And then in the next video, we're going to consider the second set of scientific materials, specifically the gunshot residue evidence. But in this video, we're going to start with the DNA material, which was recovered from items, or specifically one item, found in the boot of John Paul Wooten's car. We're looking at a picture of Ardowen, which is a Catholic housing estate close to Lismore Manor, relatively close. And it is here that John Paul Wooten was arrested on the 10th of March 2009. The passages 25 and 26 of the judgment in this case deal with the arrest of John Paul Wooten. It says, at 3:54 on the 10th of March, Sergeant Lockhart observed John Paul Wooten approach the Ardowen Flats, 401A to F, from the direction of the Brownlow Road. And you'll remember that the Brownlow Road was the road leading away from Lismore Manor and towards Lurgan and Portadown. He went to the ground floor window of the flat and around to the far side of the building. He emerged shortly afterwards, walking towards the Brownlow Road. Police approached him and asked him to accompany them to the rear of the Land Rover. He agreed and started to walk. As he walked, he asked why he was being arrested. The police officers took hold of his left arm and informed him that he was being arrested. At that stage, he broke free. He was held by the police and informed that he was arrested under Section 41 of the Terrorism Act of 2000. He was cautioned and made no reply. The police removed from him car keys which belonged to the Citroen Saxo motor vehicle, which was then seized by the police outside of 401 Ardowen. It was transferred to the Major Investigation Team hangar at Marydown on the 11th of March 2009 and driven by a CSI Hayley Strachan to a CSI garage where it was photographed and swabbed. That location will be important for our consideration of the evidence later on. But for now, the important lines are those which conclude this paragraph. A number of items were removed from the boot. These included a brown jacket, a blue hooded sweatshirt, a black body warmer, and 2 seat covers from the boot. The most important item for our purposes is the brown jacket, which became known as Exhibit HGS-3. So HGS-3 is a brown jacket that was found in the boot of John Paul Wooten's car. And the jacket was seized on the 10th of March 2009 when John Paul Wooten was arrested. After the jacket was seized, it was tested by the Crown's forensic examiner. And this is a short extract from the initial findings of their DNA expert. It reads, a number of areas were sampled in an attempt to determine who could have worn the jacket. The areas targeted were mainly from the inside surfaces, namely the cuffs, collar, elbows, armpits, pockets, and zip pull. A total of 16 samples were tested. A sample from the inside back of the collar was tested, and a full DNA profile matching Brendan McConville's profile was obtained. The profile was of medium strength. The result from a sample taken from the inside right cuff showed that DNA from more than one person was present. The result could be separated into major and minor contributors. In my opinion, the major part was a full profile, and this matched Brendan McConville's profile. The profile was a medium strength. It's these two results which tie Brendan McConville to the jacket known as HGS/3. They are a full medium strength profile from the inside back of the collar and a full major profile from the inside right cuff. The report goes on to state that other DNA findings were obtained, but none were suitable for statistical analysis or evaluation. The Crown's expert then continues to compare her scientific findings against a particular proposition, and that proposition is whether or not in order to understand why this is important, we have to understand one factor about Brendan McConville's police interviews. Brendan McConville was interviewed firstly on the 10th of March, but then for a number of days after that, he goes 12 days. And the only thing he said in the course of those interviews was that he was not the owner of HGS/3. So in the course of one of those police station interviews, he states categorically that he was not the owner of HGS/3. The Crown's expert is then invited to consider whether the DNA findings that she states in her report are conducive to Brendan McConville being the regular wearer of the jacket or not. She states, "If an individual had regularly worn the jacket, then I would have a moderate expectation of finding some DNA matching them on the inside surfaces of the jacket, in particular on the collar and cuffs. The strength of any matching DNA could range from weak to strong. I may also expect to detect DNA from someone other than the wearer on the inside of the jacket. This is because small amounts of other people's DNA can be transferred to a garment via the wearer through the jacket having contact with other people or surfaces. However, I would expect any non-wearer DNA present to be at a weak level." We know that the two profiles taken from HGS/3 from the collar and right-hand cuff were both medium strength and full profiles matching Brendan McConville. She goes on to test whether or not the DNA findings from the jacket would be conducive to Brendan McConville not being the regular wearer, and therefore having those profiles transferred to the jacket in some way which was not conducive to him being the regular wearer. She therefore has to consider the possibility of what is known as secondary transfer. Secondary transfer is effectively where DNA reaches a garment for reasons non-connected with the wearer actually wearing the garment and having physical and direct contact with the garment. She states, when secondary transfer of DNA, such as in the form of skin cells or dried saliva, occurs, it usually results in weak-level partial DNA results. Therefore, I would have a low expectation of obtaining the medium-level full profiles found on the jacket if the DNA matching Brendan McConville had transferred via another surface. So her assertion here is that if the DNA had transferred to the jacket via some other surface, i.e. by rubbing against a surface that Brendan McConville had touched previously, then she would expect the profile that had resulted from that transfer to be weaker than those that she identified on HGS/3. She continues, if the secondary transfer of DNA occurred, then the scenario would have to account for the DNA being transferred to the inside of the jacket and to several different areas on the inside. The only full DNA profiles obtained from the many areas tested on the jacket were those matching Brendan McConville. Therefore, if he was not the regular wearer, then the true wearer has only deposited low levels of DNA or none at all. So the fact that Brendan McConville was the only full medium strength profile found on the inside of the jacket was not conducive to someone else being the regular wearer of the jacket, and therefore, by purpose of elimination, Brendan McConville is the most likely regular wearer of the jacket, according to this report. No full or partial DNA results that could be specifically attributed to John Paul Wooten were detected on the areas of the jacket tested. Therefore, no secondary transfer of DNA from the regular user of the car to the jacket has been detected. She therefore concludes that secondary transfer by way of the vehicle is not going to be likely. She concludes in summary that DNA profiles matching Brendan McConville were obtained from the inside collar and cuffs of the brown jacket, HSG/3. In my opinion, the DNA findings were more likely to have been obtained if Brendan McConville was the regular wearer of the jacket rather than if he was not. So this is the qualified conclusion of the DNA evidence related to HGS/3, that the findings were effectively more conducive with Brendan McConville being the regular wearer of the jacket than if he was not the regular wearer of the jacket. However, we remember that in the course of his interview, he denied being the owner of the jacket and said nothing about whether he had worn the jacket regularly, whether he had worn it occasionally, whether he had worn it recently, whether he had worn it that day. He makes no comment whatsoever about when he last wore the jacket or whether he wore the jacket regularly. He merely denied proprietary ownership of the jacket. However, the judge gave this relatively short shrift. In the paragraphs dealing with the jacket and the DNA on the jacket, the judge finds that the DNA evidence in relation to the coat clearly pointed towards the conclusion that Brendan McConville was the habitual wearer of the coat. His DNA alone was clearly distinctly found on the coat. His DNA was on the collar and one cuff, the judge notes, with some evidence of it being present on the other cuff, the very places where one would expect to find the DNA of the usual wearer. There was no sufficient DNA to indicate any other habitual wearer. Faced with the strong prima facie case that Brendan McConville was the habitual wearer of the coat, he has not gone into the witness box to present evidence contradicting that reasonable conclusion. It's here that the judge begins to veer into what we call an inference. He finds an inference about the fact that Brendan McConville has not given evidence to explain the prima facie case that he was the regular wearer of the jacket. Brendan McConville did not give any evidence in his defence in the course of this case, and the judge makes a number of inferences as a result of his failure to give evidence, which he finds to shore up the prima facie case against him. He says that the inference to be drawn from the fact that he has not given evidence is that he does not have an explanation to counter the conclusion that he was the habitual wearer. He has given no sworn evidence to back up his police statement, that was the police statement given in the course of his interview, which is unsupported by sworn testimony, and little weight can be attached to that statement. He then goes on to say that the finding that Brendan McConville was the habitual wearer of the coat leaves the conclusion that in saying he was not the owner of the coat, that he was lying. The question is then left to the judge to determine why a person would lie about the ownership of a particular coat. And the judge again infers that the reason why Brendan McConville lied was to disguise his connection to the jacket, and the reason why he lied about his connection to the jacket was to hide his connection to the shooting of PC Stephen Carroll on the 9th of March 2009. So the judge concludes that Brendan McConville was, firstly, the regular wearer of the jacket, HGS/3, and secondly, that he had lied in the course of his police station interview when he said he was not the owner of the jacket, and thirdly, that his reason for lying was not innocent, but rather to hide his connection to the shooting of PC Stephen Carroll. And in the next video, we will talk about the gunshot residue evidence and how it connected HGS/3 to the shooting of PC Stephen Carroll. Thank you very much.